Future perfect continuous has two different forms. Will have been doing and be going to have been doing. Unlike simple future forms, future perfect continuous forms are usually interchangeable. Yeah, so does learning English ever feel a little bit like that to you? Well, if you watch this video until the end, we're going to give you our methodology that we've used with all of our students for dramatic changes in how they perceive the language and results and fluency. Now, this methodology has 10 parts, which you don't necessarily have to do in order, and it's broken down into 3 cyclical steps. So we're going to jump right into that, but before we do, I want to let you know that if you are new here, every single week we help you to understand fast-speaking natives, to be understood by anyone, and to connect to the world. Just like our fan Yushaf, who says that our lessons are helping him in his goal to reach the 8-band score on the IELTS exam. So we'll help you to reach all of your fluency goals as well. It's really simple, just hit that subscribe button and the bell below and you won't miss a single one of our new lessons. All right, so starting out with the first step in the cycle, we have mindset. Now, we have 3 parts to this. The first one being your purpose. Now, this is where we start with all of our students, because something that we've noticed about all successful English learners is that they have a clear, burning desire to learn the language. And being able to cultivate this is going to make you so much more successful because it's going to help you to get past those really challenging moments when you want to give up. So what we do with our students is we have them start with why. Now, I actually talked all about this in a recent video where we looked at some of the kind of bigger impacts that one can make with their English, and you can definitely check that out down in the description below. But basically, this is about not starting with what, which what is basically the thing that you want to get, your goal, right? So for you, it's probably English fluency. It's being able to communicate with others confidently and without a lot of mistakes, right? But in order to get there first, you have to have that drive behind it. You have to have that strong purpose, that strong why. So I recommend that you actually write this down so you can get some clarity around it and you can actually look at it every day. Now, I have an exercise that I used to do with all of my students, and I talked about that in that video that I just mentioned, so definitely check that out. So the second part is having a clear plan. So we kind of move from that why down to the how. So how are you going to get to your goal of English fluency? Now, a really important part of this can actually come from a book that I absolutely love called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which I actually talked about in a recent lesson that I did on some of the best books for your English learning. And if you are a book lover like I am, then you might find that interesting to add some books to your list. And I'll definitely link that as well down in the description below. But this concept of start with the end in mind. Now, this is actually about thinking or even visualizing where you're going to be when you reach that goal. So you could actually even close your eyes and think about, when I am a fluent, confident English communicator, what will life be like? Where will you be? What will you be doing? How will you be using your English differently than you are now? Something that can help a lot with this is actually meditation, because it gives you the focus that you need to concentrate on the moment. It will allow you to get that visualization of where you want to be much stronger. And another exercise that I love for this is kind of a fill-in-the-blank activity. So it goes like this. When blank happens, I usually do blank, but now instead I will blank. So that sounds kind of confusing. Let me give you an example. So say that usually when you sit down to study your English, you get distracted by your phone and you usually start to look at Instagram, for instance. So we want to rewrite that behavior, right? So we would say instead that when I sit down to study English, usually I get distracted by my phone and look at Instagram for 30 minutes. But now instead, I will set a 10-minute timer, look at my Instagram as much as I want during that time, and then I'm going to put my phone away in another room where it can't distract me so that I can study. Or let's look at another example. Say that you want to go and speak English and you have opportunities to practice, but that you get really shy. So maybe something that you could try is that when I feel myself getting really shy, I usually just decide that I'm not going to talk to anyone and I go home or something like that. But now, instead, what I'm going to do is go up to the person and just say hello. So maybe that oversimplifies it, but really if you do this exercise, you're going to find that when you actually interact with those challenges, when you actually reach those roadblocks, that you're going to feel much more prepared for it because you already have made a plan for how to deal with them. So I highly recommend that you actually try taking some moments to pause the video and writing some things down like that. So when you do this, when you start with the end in mind and then you kind of work your way backwards, imagining the challenges, you're kind of giving a summary of the entire process. You're kind of able to look at it almost as if it were a tangible object. Now, what has to happen then is you actually have to do the work in the day-to-day, right, to actually reach that end goal. Now, the best way to do this really is through small steps every single day. Now, we'll talk more about habits in a little bit, but actually I would just share with you that recently I just got a new puppy, and so I'm in the process of training her. Now, something that has worked really well for me is instead of trying to sit down for an hour every day and train her, is instead just finding 3 to 5 minute blocks throughout the day where we can just do very quick, different little trainings. And this is obviously much easier for her. She has a very short attention span. It's much easier for me because it's more convenient. And you can totally do this with your English. I'm sure that you are busy and stuff. You have trouble actually carving out an hour or 2 hours of time to study. And really, it's not that motivating to do that. So what kind of little things can you do throughout your day that will help you to make it much more easy and convenient and fun for you? I actually did a video recently also talking about things that you can do every day to improve your English, which I'll link down below that might give you some more ideas. All right, finally, there is a science called implementation intentions. Now, what is that? That sounds really complex, right? But it's actually quite simple. Now, most people, when they want to learn anything or they want to do anything important, they feel some resistance to it. And usually they'll say, you know, I don't feel like doing it right now. I'll do it later. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it someday. But what happens then is that you end up never really doing it. But what you need to do instead, basically, is just start doing it. Start doing it with something really small, really easy, just to kind of get it going. Now, basically what happens here is that if you're waiting for the motivation to come, it never really comes. But when you start doing it with something really small, something really easy, kind of the simplest way that you can just get it rolling, what happens is that the motivation then comes and you end up probably doing a lot more than you intended. Now, if you think about anything, any work that you've done in the past, any project that you've worked on, this probably has been something that you've kind of naturally done. You've resisted it at first, but as soon as you got started, that motivation just kind of naturally came and it got easier. Now, to build this intention, it can also be really useful to write down when and where you're going to be doing this thing. Now, different studies have shown this can actually make you 2 times more effective in accomplishing your goal. So again, it kind of comes back to these little exercises that you can do to kind of reflect, to visualize, to think about that end plan and work your way backwards. Now we're going to talk more about this in step 2, but really you can think about this whole entire video as kind of a plan for your English fluency, to how to get to that end goal. So that said, let's move on to the third part, which is about cultivating grit. Now, what is grit? So an author named Angela Duckworth, she actually wrote a book all about grit. And this is because she identified it in studying different successful people, from athletes to musicians to people in the army to really any walk of life, that this was the #1 characteristic that kind of unified all these people in being able to be so successful. So grit helps you to cultivate your joy and your curiosity for learning English. So what is it exactly? Grit is perseverance plus passion. Now, passion, that kind of comes back to your purpose for learning. It's that drive behind it. It's that thing that gets you excited to start doing it, to reach that big goal. Now, you might think of passion as something that you either have or you don't have, but a lot of times it's not something that you just innately have. A lot of times it's something that you actually have to do some work in cultivating. And then perseverance is actually showing up every day and doing the hard work. Now, another really important part of this that's going to make you successful in cultivating grit is having a growth mindset. Now, you can either have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. People with a fixed mindset basically think that either they have the talent to do something or they don't. So, for example, if they have some challenge, they're probably just going to say, you know, I'm just not good at this, so I might as well give up. Or if they actually are successful at something, they think maybe it's because they were born with that success or because they're really intelligent or something like that. Now, people with a growth mindset think kind of differently. When they fail at something, they don't think, it's because I just don't have the talent for it. They say, I need to work harder next time. I didn't work hard enough and that's why I failed. So when they encounter any challenge, basically their idea is that I need to still learn something. I need to work harder. I need to try more next time. Now, if you feel like you have more of a fixed mindset, don't worry, you can cultivate a growth mindset. This is something that we help all of our students to do. Now in step 6, we're going to talk more about deliberate practice. Now this really is the key to being able to reach mastery in anything that you want to learn or any skill that you want to build. And obviously having grit and having a growth mindset are going to help you a lot at that. But we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Okay, moving on from mindset, we're going to get into the actual method. So what are the things that you actually need to work on to improve your English skills? So the first part of this is making English a part of your life. Now this is probably the most fun part of the process, and it's probably the #1 thing that separates unsuccessful learners from the successful learners. So this is all about making it fun, natural, and convenient. But it's also really important to recognize that as learners, we're all unique, and each one of us have different ways that we learn best. So what worked perfectly for someone else might not necessarily work for you. So not only is it about sitting down and actually doing the work to learn, but it's about experimenting a lot and finding out what works best for you as a learner. It's about getting curious and trying a lot of different things. And it shouldn't be putting you to sleep either. If someone told you, for example, that learning English with the news is a really great way to increase your vocabulary, you shouldn't do that just because that person told you so if it's not something that you actually already enjoy doing in your own language. So this can actually be a really great gauge, is to look at what do I enjoy doing and to start doing those things as much as possible in English. And another thing that can be really effective that I used to have all of my students do is thinking about something that you're really good at. Now, you could actually journal about this and think about what are the things that made you really successful in learning that thing or in acquiring that skill. And then you can kind of reflect on how can I apply what I learned in that to my English learning. And I think you might see that there's actually a lot of connections that you can make that are going to really help to push you forward and help you discover what makes you unique as a learner. So part 5, let's talk about habits now. So we already discussed this a little bit, and it can be really effective already to find things that are fun for you, that are going to be very easy for you to work into your day-to-day routine. But other than this, it's not always so fun, and you might need to actually kind of work on developing that habit. So a really effective way to do this can be with something called micro habits. So what are micro habits? Micro habits can help you to lower the bar and make it super easy for you. So just to give you an example, say that you want to start going to the gym, you want to get in shape, and so most people when they do this, they think like, okay, I'm going to sign up for the gym and I'm going to go 4 times a week for an hour. But what ends up happening is most people give up at some point because they just can't keep up with that commitment, they get busy or something like that. And really, you can make it much easier than this. Instead of saying I'm going to go for 4 days a week for an hour, say I'm going to go 4 days a week and I'm just going to work out for 5 minutes. Now that probably sounds a little bit ridiculous, right? To go to the gym and just work out for 5 minutes. But the thing is that it makes it so easy that you can't not do it. It's just really simple for you to go to the gym and work out for 5 minutes that any excuse that you're going to make just won't be valid, right? And what's going to happen is that you're going to go there, you're going to start exercising for 5 minutes, and then you're going to say, well, as long as I'm here, I think I'll do a little bit more. So you can also apply this, of course, to your English learning. You can, instead of saying, I need to sit down for an hour every day and study grammar, you can say, well, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do 5 exercises. So first off, it'll be really easy for you to find the time to do this. And then the second benefit is that usually when you've sat down to do those 5 exercises, maybe you'll actually enjoy it and you'll say, well, I'm going to do a little bit more. And this can actually end up being a lot more time than you originally intended. And the best part of this is that if you're doing this every day or you're doing this a few times a week, you'll be kind of cultivating the foundation for that habit. So in the future, it'll be much easier for you to increase that time that you're spending to develop that habit. So let's look at some other tips that can help you to cultivate habits. So something that can be really useful when you're trying to develop a new habit is actually giving yourself some reward when you complete it every day or every time that you're doing it. And just to give you an example, say that you're wanting to start running. You're wanting to start running every single day. Now, besides just doing a micro habit, for example, of making it 5 minutes of running to start out, you could actually give yourself a reward. So every time that you come back from running, you could have a piece of chocolate, let's say. Now by doing this, it's going to give you a bit of motivation to get out the door to go on that run because you'll already be thinking about when you come back, you're going to have that piece of chocolate. Now, when you do this, eventually you won't even need the chocolate anymore because you'll just enjoy that good feeling that you have after running. Now, it's really simple to apply this to your English learning. So say, for example, that you need to study some vocabulary and you need some motivation to do that. So say that you could set up that, okay, I'm going to study vocabulary for 15 minutes, but then after as a reward, I can watch an episode of Friends. And then on the other side of this, besides giving yourself rewards, consequences can also be really useful. And especially when you get other people involved to kind of hold you accountable. So let's take an example with this. So say that you tell your wife or your husband or a friend, for example, that you want to do this 15 minutes of grammar study every single day, or that you want to have a 20-minute conversation every single day. So how you could actually do this is by telling them that every day that you don't do this, you're going to give them $5 or, the equivalent in your currency. Now, first off, you're probably not going to want to lose that $5, so you'll sit down to do it. Or even if you fail on that a couple times, you'll probably learn pretty quickly that it's more worthwhile to actually do that new habit than it is to lose those $5. And the other really great part of this is if you tell your wife or husband or friend or whoever, they're also going to be checking in to make sure that you're doing that because they're going to want the money. Now, if you don't have a lot of money, that's of course not the only way that you can do this. You would also tell, for example, your wife or husband that for every day that you don't do that new habit, that you will take out the trash. Now, if that is something that you really hate doing, again, you'll probably just need to miss that study 1 or 2 times in order to start seeing that it's more worthwhile for me to actually just do it than it is for me to have to take out the trash. Now, you can learn more about the science of habit formation and how you can apply this to your English in that lesson that I already told you about the top books, where I looked at a really great book called The Power of Habit. Now, getting into part 6, we already talked about this a little bit, deliberate practice. Now, deliberate practice really is the fine-tuning that you're doing to kind of take yourself to the next level. So what happens usually is when we're learning a language, we get to what's called the intermediate plateau. So usually when we start out learning, we can learn really quickly. There's so much to learn and our progress is really quick. But at some point, we kind of get flat. It kind of gets really stagnant and really difficult to kind of be acquiring more knowledge, to really be taking our skills to the next level. And this is where deliberate practice comes in. So this is identifying kind of those key errors that you're still making, kind of the big things that you still have to solve, and repairing those or solving them or overcoming them. And a really great way to do this is to actually sign up for an exam. I actually had recent experience with this last year when I was really focusing on learning Catalan, and I had actually kind of experienced this, that I felt like I was really stagnant in my learning. I wasn't progressing anymore. So I signed up for the C1 exam, and I found this really useful because first off, I actually had a date by when I would have to take that exam, and so I had a time period that I had to make that plan for learning. And then I also had very specific things that I would have to learn in order to pass that exam. The other thing is that I got a teacher who helped me immensely in being able to identify kind of my key errors, my key mistakes that I needed to solve. Now, by doing this, I found that I really excelled in just a short period of time. I think I had 3 months to study, and I learned so much during that time and really improved my level in this. And again, having a really great teacher or coach can be immensely helpful because they'll help you to identify your gaps and see those mistakes that you're making a lot. And usually a good coach or a good teacher is going to have different techniques to help you to overcome these things. Without a great coach or teacher, I think it's near impossible to ever be able to reach a level of mastery. And then another thing I think is immensely helpful is to have a really great support network or community. Now, these would be people who either support you so they know your goal and they're kind of there to help you out in any way that you need, and of course a teacher could play this role. But another really great thing is a community. If you have other English learners from around the world especially, or maybe even just from your class, that are in this together. They're all kind of going through the same challenges with you, and they're there when you're kind of having difficulties, when you're going through different challenges. We have, for example, our Fluency Circle that's included with all of our courses, and people find this immensely helpful to kind of be going on this learning journey together. All right, so we've talked about making English a fun, natural, and convenient part of your life. We've talked about developing the habits that will make it so you don't even really have to think about learning English. And then finally, if you're wanting to go from that intermediate plateau where you feel like you're not learning anything and breaking through to a more advanced level, how important deliberate practice is. So the next step in the cycle is mastery. It's to help you to actually reach that goal of English fluency or whatever your goal is with your English, and to be able to communicate confidently. So the first part of this is listening. So most people, I think when they talk about their English, they talk about wanting to be able to speak English better. But really until you get to the point where your listening is really bulletproof, it's really that you can understand natives at any speed, that when you get an interaction, you feel comfortable being able to understand people, it's going to be really hard to be a great speaker. Now, why is it so difficult to understand? For most of us, what we learned in school isn't the way that natives actually speak in real life, right? Probably the first time that you actually heard natives, we did things that you weren't expecting at all. We cut our words, we link them together, we morph different sounds into things that you're not expecting at all. And in fact, if this is an issue that you have, it's something that we look at in all of our courses, and you can actually join our free Power Learning Week, which is really great to kind of learn some of these different things that natives do, so that when you encounter native speech, you can actually expect how we're going to say things and understand. So if you want to learn more about that and sign up, it's really simple. Just click up here or down the description below. And another really big issue that I see most English learning facing is that you filter English through your native language. Now this is pretty natural because most of us learn through methodologies that teach us through translation. So kind of naturally in our head, we've built this habit of translating from our native language into English. But the bad thing about this is that when we read anything, usually we expect it to be pronounced like it would be in our native language, when this is almost never the case. So I've heard this called lexophilia. Now that's a made-up word, I didn't invent it, but basically it means that you're depending on your eyes too much. So basically what you need to do instead to kind of break these habits that you got when you were learning English in school is to start to trust your ears more. So it's listening a lot more instead of reading. It's depending less on the subtitles to kind of help you and stuff. It's learning how we actually pronounce things, so you're not just depending on the subtitles and starting to expect us to speak in one way that we don't speak at all. Now we'll get to reading and speaking in a moment, but another really important aspect of listening, and I think also of speaking, is developing survival phrases. Now, survival phrases basically are different phrases that you'll have in your arsenal, that you will have available to you, that will help you to overcome certain challenges when you get the opportunity to have a conversation with someone. So these would be saying things like, sorry, I didn't understand, or can you say that again? So instead of just freezing up because you don't know what to say, or because you didn't understand what the person said, or kind of just nodding up and down even though you have no idea what the person's saying, you'll have these kind of different phrases that you can depend on, that you can ask that person to go slower or to come to your level so that you'll feel more comfortable with the conversation and you'll be able to participate more. You'll be more of a communicator. And one of my biggest pet peeves, one of the things I find most annoying, is when learners start off the conversation by saying, sorry for my poor English, or sorry for my mistakes. Now, I really, really want you to never apologize for your English again. The reason for this is because, first off, you're kind of telling that person already that my English isn't good, which that shouldn't kind of be your intention from the start of the conversation. Let them make their own perception of how your English is. Because when you're already telling them that, then maybe they're going to think it's worse than it actually is. Maybe they will even be communicating to you a much slower way that's not going to really be doing you any favors in being able to take your skills to the next level. The other reason for this is that you've worked really hard to get your English to the level where it is. If you're understanding even part of what I'm saying right now, then you've put so much sweat and tears, I'm sure, into your English learning, and you should be proud of that. You shouldn't be apologizing for that. So put away your apologies and get your survival phrases. We actually did a recent podcast on this, which I'll link in the description below if you want to learn all about what those are and how to start using them. But that brings us to the next part, which is speaking. So that's probably one of your biggest goals, right, is improving your speaking. Now, before you can even really improve your speaking, first we need to look at confidence. Because, if you are too shy or too scared to go up to someone and start that first conversation, then you're never going to be able to improve your speaking. This comes from having vulnerability and courage. So vulnerability is being able to say to someone, not sorry for my English, but I'm still learning and so I might need some of your help a little bit. And the courage is basically being able to go up to someone and just start that conversation. Courage is also learning the value of fears. It's seeing them as these stepping stones to get you to the fluency. It's overcoming your fear of them and actually seeing them as a tool to improve. Now, we talked before about lowering the bar, about making baby steps. So what are kind of the baby steps that you can take for speaking? It's maybe not trying to go out to a party and having a conversation with 50 people at once. It's maybe just trying to have one conversation with someone in your English class or with a friend that you know who also speaks English. Now, I recommend speaking with non-native speakers before native speakers because this can really help to boost your confidence. First of all, other learners are going to be more empathetic because they're going through the same thing as you, and you probably won't be as self-conscious about your mistakes and stuff because you won't be as worried about that person judging you. Now, if you consider yourself shy or you are an introvert, then that's another thing completely, and I actually did a lesson all about that, which will be in the description as well. But one of the really most important things is to start speaking from day one. Now, if you're watching this, I'm sure that's not really possible for you anymore, but the reason that I say that is because when you start learning a language, if already from the very first day that you are learning it, you start speaking, it's really going to do wonders for your confidence. You're not going to have all this fear. A lot of that fear kind of comes from the fact that when you were learning in school, you had very limited opportunities to speak, and so you weren't able to build that confidence in using the language. But if you're not speaking already, then you need to start practicing a lot. Now, it's not necessarily that you actually have to live in an English-speaking country to be able to do this. You can start practicing even by yourself if you don't have anyone else. If you feel a little bit weird practicing by yourself, then speak to your dog, speak to your kids, speak to a friend, speak to yourself in the mirror even. Just start speaking. And as a bonus, you can start recording yourself and listen back and correct some of your own mistakes. You could also try shadowing. So to do this, you would just listen to an audio in English by a native speaker, and you would actually repeat exactly what they're saying at the same time, trying to say it the same way that they are. Or just for example, what one of my students used to do is that he had a lot of traffic on his way to work. So he would take advantage of this time by beforehand looking up different topics and discussing that with himself in the car on the way to work. And really, his speaking got so great just by doing this. Now, once you're actually practicing, you're kind of getting that confidence of being able to speak, whether it's speaking with other people or just practicing a lot speaking by yourself, although at some point you are going to need to speak with other people in order to improve. The next part is actually ironing out the mistakes that you're making. Now, this comes back to deliberate practice, even if it's just a few minutes a day. And what you're going to be focusing on, especially here, is having clear pronunciation. So for most of you out there, it's not going to be necessary to actually speak like a native, although you can improve your connected speech and you can really work on the different aspects of that if that is really important for you, but it's going to be tremendously difficult. But for most of you, clear pronunciation will be enough and is absolutely necessary because people need to be able to understand you. And again, I really think it's going to be near impossible for you to achieve mastery in your speaking if you don't have a great teacher or coach who's helping you along the way, who's helping you to point out those errors and helping you to iron them out. Now hang in there with me, we're almost done. That brings us to the next part, which is reading and writing. Now, depending on your goals for it and your use of your English, this isn't going to be so important for everyone, but if it is important for you, then really it can be one of the best ways to improve your vocabulary. Of course, by reading, you're able to encounter all sorts of words that people don't actually tend to use so much in their day-to-day. But reading a lot can actually really help you to improve your writing because you're kind of experiencing different stylistics of the language being used. You're experiencing certain vocabulary that's a lot more literary, and it's just kind of giving you more exposure to how things can be well written in English. So a great thing about reading is that it's really easy to make it a part of your life. One thing that I do is I read another language every day before bed. So, this is a really great way for me to kind of be able to wind down, to be able to relax in the evening. And it's also just kind of a way that I'm subconsciously improving my language skills. So this can be really great because you're kind of seeing the grammar in use, for example. And when you do this, of course, you can study it more. But even if you're just passively reading, it's going to kind of get into your head. And again, if you sign up for a test, this is going to be really helpful to improve your writing because usually there's some sort of writing aspect, so you're going to have to focus on this in order to be able to pass that exam. And again, having a teacher can be immensely helpful, not only to be able to improve your mistakes, but also to help you kind of to be able to write better, to be able to say things in a nicer way. And the final part, I think this is like the most important part of the entire process, is actually using your English for a higher purpose. It's using it to kind of make that change in the world. So I did a recent lesson on this, so I'm not going to really go into it too much. You can watch that. It's linked down below if you want to. But the thing about this is that it's really the highest level that you can get in your English learning is actually paying it forward with your English. It's being able to start seeing the planet as a whole living organism that we all live on, and having that realization that no matter what divides us, what unites us as human beings is so much stronger. All right, so do you want to know how successful that you're going to be on your English learning journey? What you have to do is count out how many of the 10 that you're currently doing, write that down in the comments below, and also write what is the first thing you're going to focus on in order to improve. And of course, subscribe because we make videos every week to help you with each one of these 10. So first off, do you have a clear, burning purpose for learning English? Do you have a plan of how you will accomplish your goal? And do you know what you're going to do when it gets really difficult? Do you have passion and perseverance? Can you keep at it even when it gets really difficult? Do you make English a part of your life? And do you not even really have to think about it because you already have created positive habits? Do you do deliberate practice? Those hard exercises that you need to iron out the imperfections? And do you work on your listening consistently so that you can understand without getting lost? Do you practice your speaking every day, even if it's by yourself? Do you read in English instead of your native language whenever possible? And finally, are you using your English to make a difference in the world? Remember to write your score down in the comments below. And now it's time to go beyond the classroom and live your English. Aw, yeah! And maybe like yourself, I am an introvert. But learning languages over the last 12 years has helped me a ton in being able to overcome the paralyzing shyness that I felt when I was younger. So let me tell you that if you are shy or you believe that maybe you're an introvert, that this does not need to be a barrier to being able to speak English fluently and confidently.